My name's Daniel Bushell. The chickens come home to roost for America's global debt heist. Coming up.
Washington makes states take Wall Street's kiss of death. Presidents assassinated. How nations fall in the Tequila Trap.
When capitalist convert Russia turned to Washington for help, the White House met to decide the worst possible advice.
We have to smash them into the ground. We want to feed them bad economic advice so they will fall apart. Shock therapy.
They decided the worst was ready to go in the IMF Wall Street method. Destruction of the nation's industry overnight, pensions and savings wiped out. The IMF demands speculators are let in. Wall Street duly starts joint raids, gutting the stock market and national currency. Congress was informed it worked like a dream.
The IMF has presided over a catastrophe worse than our own Great Depression. Russia opened itself to dependence on money it had been creating itself before the wolf got in the door in IMF shock therapy.
The worst hyperinflation in history hit Yugoslavia when the IMF demanded bankrupting 1,000 companies, destroying social programs and forcing regions to literally fight for survival. Violent protests known as IMF riots are even factored into the austerity package. Author and Balkans specialist Nebojsa Malic, thanks a lot for joining us. Our country is literally destroyed by Wall Street and IMF.
It was definitely an assisted suicide. I maintain it's a suicide. Some people are more inclined to say it was murder, but it was definitely assisted from the outside. What we're seeing with the IMF and the World Bank and all these international financial advisors and experts is that they're not really interested in the country itself surviving or being tenable. All they're interested is in extracting as much wealth out of it as possible.
This is how they do it.
One of my jobs as an economic hitman was to identify countries with resources like oil and arrange huge loans to benefit a few very wealthy families. The people would be left holding this huge debt they couldn't repay. The IMF comes in, we'll help you restructure your loan, but you have to sell your coveted resource.
Most of the world's nations have been caught in a form of Mexico's triple stripping, known as the Tequila Trap. Lured by promises of more investment, first the floodgates were opened to Wall Street speculators. In just 20 days, Goldman Sachs and co. suddenly and mysteriously disappeared over $4 billion from the country. The previously strong peso and Mexican stock market then collapsed, letting Wall Street cherry-pick assets on the cheap. And when Mexico ran out of money to pay back Wall Street debts, Goldman chief squid Robert Rubin stepped in. He moved to US Treasury Sec and the same day signed a massive bailout by US taxpayers of Mexico. But the money went straight to US banks. Triple stripping Tequila Trap mission accomplished. While Mexico's nursed a recession hangover for over a decade, Wall Street literally cracks open the bubbly.
There was a big party at Morgan Stanley after the peso devaluation. People from all over Wall Street came. They drank champagne and smoked cigars and congratulated themselves. These people are pirates, international pirates.
Top Mexican economists taken their own figures to show Washington's globalization campaign is a sham. This shock graph shows any gains from international trade eat up internal commerce within a country, leaving no net gains, just huge disruption to communities. The author of that report joins us, Dr. Carlos Encinas. What did you find?
I found that, in effect, international trades benefited only a tiny group of the super rich. Globalization's been great for them, not for the world. The rest of us pay twice. First for more imports, then high interest on the loans to afford them.
The Federal Reserve is not actually federal. It's a private corporation owned by a consortium of Wall Street banks. They pay the Fed's economists like Ben Bernanke to come up with the hogwash that gets people to try the Tequila Trap. Bernanke claims globalization, opening up to international speculators, boosts the nation's GDP an impressive 10%. Then someone actually looked at his figures. The benefits are actually just 0.1%. And that's only after 8 years of ideal trade conditions that exist just in theory, such as total absence of corruption.
One of the most widely cited factoids in defense of free trade is rubbish. Financial globalization has not generated increased investment or higher growth. The countries that have grown most rapidly rely least on capital inflows.
Rapid growth countries like Ecuador get vicious pressure from Washington for steering clear of Wall Street. Programs like USAID are scrapped and presidents are assassinated. In Confessions of an Economic Hitman, former IMF exec John Perkins writes, when the fund fails to get its way, the CIA sanctions the murder of the country's leader. It's accompanied by outright lies from corporate media, so the public never finds out. Ellen Brown's considered one of the most outstanding thinkers in economics. Her book, Web of Debt, rips Wall Street's global fraud apart. Thanks so much for coming on. What really happens in countries that avoid Wall Street?
Ecuador has been a brilliant success, and even when they try to say negative things about it, there's just not much you can criticize. What they've done, for example, they actually have nationalized the oil. And they're using those oil revenues they use to back their central banks. So they're actually backing development with their own oil company. I mean, imagine if they would allow the U.S. government to actually go into business of different sorts. The government might actually have some money. They told the Argentinians that it would be a disaster. It worked brilliantly well. They told the Ecuadorians and in Iceland, they tried to scare them into going with the program, and they defied the big banks, and it worked out much better for them than for the countries that have gone along. I mean, look at Greece. It hasn't helped them at all to go along.
The Greek tragedy's coming to America. Wall Street gave more than anyone else to Obama's re-election campaign. He's now agreed to bring austerity to the US, as the Goldman boss requests.
You're going to have to undoubtedly do something to lower people's expectations, the entitlements, and what people think that they're going to get, because they're not going to get it.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid?
Some things, and you could go back and you can look at the history of these things, and Social Security wasn't devised to be a system that supported you. The retirement age has to be changed, maybe some of the benefits have to be affected. Entitlements have to be slowed down and contained.
Neoliberalism isn't even in the interests of America. Millions of US jobs are being shipped abroad, 500,000 each year to China alone, in the name of globalization. Author and former Wall Street banker Yves Smith, thanks very much for coming on. Does what they're doing make any sense?
There are entire industries the United States has ceded, one of the big examples being furniture. There is no compelling economic reason to have furniture made in China. The wood is here. The wood is a significant material cost. Shipping it to and from is a considerable expense. The labor here is more than adequate to it's not as if the labor cost is such a big component that it made sense to ship it overseas. What's really going on is that you've got a transfer from lower level factory workers to middle management and senior workers. Because even when you offshore and you do save the factory labor costs, you introduce a lot more coordination costs, right? You need more managers to handle all the coordination of having offshored this, and those managers are more expensive. So a lot of the cost savings are offset by the fact that middle and senior managers make more money. This is classic class warfare.
Class warfare now so severe, says Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz. He notes America is no longer the land of opportunity. Former Wall Street regulator Bill Black, thanks a lot for joining us. Stiglitz adds even developing countries now offer more chances of personal success than the US, but presumably people can only believe what mainstream economists and media tell them.
President Correa, for example, in Ecuador, who after all is a PhD economist, has had a remarkable success and is treated in both the United Kingdom and the U.S. media as if he's a crazy person. We're talking about the New York Times as well. This is not the hardest right paper, but it shows that even the supposedly liberal organs in the United States on these sort of core theoclassical issues, they tend to be badly infected by bad economics.
Yeah, where will this all end?
Well, it will end in catastrophic economic failure and defeat of democracy, but that won't necessarily be where it stops. As I said, Latin Americans got fed up being used as a test bed for austerity, and you can see from the elected national leaders there that they elected leader after leader who came to power on the express basis vote for me, I will stop the Washington consensus from being inflicted on the nation.
The looting of America has been among the easiest. The uniquely passive population stood by and watched their homes, savings, jobs robbed red-handed. A networked crackdown coordinated between FBI, DHS, the police, regional fusion centres, city mayors, private sector mercenaries and the banks themselves against the Occupy movement. Canister missiles to skulls, people cuffed so hard they bleed and left till they soil or wet themselves in the interests of the banks against the vast majority suggests any US fightback on Wall Street will be one of the hardest. This is the Truthseeker.